Okay, now that we're recording, there's 110 of you guys in here. This is honestly exceeding my wildest dreams. Let me share my screen and then we can get this going. Milan, Sara, give me the confirmation. You can see it. Everything looks good. Am I audible? I tried to restart my computer right before this, so there isn't any technical difficulties.
Everything looks good. We can hear you fine.
Great. Okay, so let's see. More people. All right, I do see more people coming in, but it's already 5:40, so I'm gonna get going. And as they come in, it's okay. They can look at the recording after the fact. This is a high-level agenda, but just to kind of, like I said, level set everyone, gives people some insights into my journey, what I've worked on, some tips that I give, just to provide some initial useful tips. And then after that, definitely jump right into the Q&A just so you guys have all the relevant or able to answer all of your pressing questions. About me, just really quick, I think you guys seen some stuff on my LinkedIn and in my Reddit post, but I'm born and raised in New Jersey in the Northeast of the US, and now I currently live in Los Angeles. I know there's a ton of you guys that are from, say, UCLA, USC, but I live like in the West Hollywood area, been here for a few years now. So my interest, I love to travel, or I love to travel when I could travel. At this point, I haven't in a very long time. And I'm super outdoorsy. You likely find me at the rock climbing gym or on a hike, etc. It's like kind of my passion, why I love LA so much. And my favorite data science topic is definitely NLP and text generation. I think if you guys are aware, these transformer models, especially GPT-2, GPT-3, and just so much fun to play with and something that I'm really passionate about. And my role currently is a senior data scientist at the Walt Disney Company. I work in their movie purchasing organization. It's essentially like the little sister of Disney Plus. And I work on a lot of personalization and recommendation engines, etc. It's kind of my my realm at Disney, and absolutely love it. So my journey, right? I think the thing I like to mention all the time is it is relatively unorthodox, right? I think I didn't come from that strong CS background, or I didn't come from a Stanford background. I didn't really code that much in undergrad. I think I'm not your kind of like boilerplate data scientist, right? All the PhD. Like I mentioned, I graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering with a minor in computer science. Now, sure, I had that minor, but at the end of the day, I didn't really code. I coded in those classes, but I never actually used it outside of there. So I didn't retain any of that information. It was just kind of a fluff minor, if you want to call it that. But I thought that was okay because I, at that point, was not even thinking about anything data or programming related at all. It's just like wasn't on my radar, wasn't something that I was even interested in the slightest bit. I was focused on going into a big aerospace company like Boeing. I was focused on working in structures, working on huge commercial aircraft. That's like really what my interest was. And fortunately, I think undergrad went well, and I was able to join a group at Boeing where I was doing structural design for their new 787 aircrafts. And that, I think, was a bit of a letdown. Sure, I got to do what I loved and it was really interesting, but I realized the atmosphere was just not for me. I think you quickly learn when you go into the workforce that the environment, the atmosphere, the people that are around you are just as important as the content of the job you're doing, right? And I quickly realized that I was like the most like alarming thing that I saw. This was kind of coinciding when data was really starting to blow up, and I thought, okay, maybe I could just see if I enjoy it. So there were some analytics organizations right by me that I started kind of like prodding and saying like, oh, can I just like shadow you? Oh, can I work on some project just to see what analytics was and how it was being used? And that really sparked my interest to really see if I could learn and understand data science or data analytics, etc. So when I work with that group, I absolutely loved it. I love the ability of retroactively analyzing data to make strategic decisions, or forecasting kind of a certain metric to be more strategic in how you move forward. I think all of that, even though that was like quote unquote like very junior or like not that sophisticated data science, I absolutely loved it. I think it was just like a really fun way to tie something technical to something strategic, right? I think it was awesome. So that sparked me to get my master's because I needed I had to work full time, right? I didn't have the luxury of getting my master's like by like full time. So while I was working, I had Boeing kind of pay for my data science master's, which really helped me build the foundation in terms of my technical data science skills to help me kind of get that first job. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions around this, but I don't think a master's is necessary. I think it definitely helped me out, and it is useful because it just checks that box that you do know what you're doing. I needed it because I could put my ego aside. I personally did not have the ability to work full time and teach myself all the skills I needed to be a good data scientist. I just didn't have that discipline. So the masters with all the homework assignments, projects really gave me that structure that I really needed. Um, Now, hopping into the data science portion of this timeline, my first job was at ZS Associates, and they are a pharmaceutical consulting firm, a management consulting firm. And I picked consulting for a couple reasons. One, it would give me a lot of experience in a short amount of time. If you don't know much about management consulting, it's crazy hours, a lot of projects. You'll be working on 3, 4, maybe even 5 projects at the same time. Um, the pro to that is I get a ton of experience in a short amount of time, and I definitely needed that, right? I think I mentioned I didn't have the pedigree and the portfolio that a lot of my quote unquote competitors had. It was something I needed, right? If I wanted to start working at these larger companies, more prestigious companies. And also, I think I got to work on a lot of NLP projects, which is something I was really looking for because it was a really big interest of mine when I was like studying data science. Um, that, like I said, it was a great experience, fulfilled the need of building up a portfolio. But as you can imagine, when you're working 60 hours, 65 hours a week, you start to burn out. And that definitely was the case for me. Um, so you guys might have seen my post about inferiority complex, right? I think that was a huge portion, and this whole like middle part is where I really was battling with that, and why I kind of highlight that as its own like moment. I got that first job, but I really underestimated how daunting it is to be a data scientist, right? I think it's so you can easily glamorize the idea of being a data scientist, being working in Jupyter notebooks, working in TensorFlow, but when you're working at that fast pace with these people who are like not even arguably are objectively more qualified than you are, I really started to like lose sight of why I even wanted to be a data scientist, and I started to feel like, oh, I'm not doing good. I'm not good enough. I shouldn't do this. I need to go back to aerospace. I made such a big mistakes. I don't mind. I'm kind of I'll open myself up to you guys and might put my ego aside. That's exactly what like I felt kind of this is a bit of a hyperbole, a little worthless. I was like, I'm not good enough for this prestigious field. Um, but I took a step back and I was like, let me try to make data science fun for me, right? Like I had fun when I was building like messy gold predictors and stuff like that. That was what was making data science fun for me. So let me get back to that. And that's kind of what I did. I started working on a bunch of interesting NLP projects, posting them on Medium with like a really interesting article that I wrote, and started to get kind of positive feedback there. And that kind of clicked in my mind that like if I just make data science fun for me and focus on incremental improvements for myself in whatever parts of my skill set that need to be improved, that is a win, right? I don't need to be an accomplished data scientist in a year. I just need to be an accomplished data scientist at some point. And whatever trajectory or however long that takes, I should be okay with as long as I'm making improvements. And I think when I started writing, sharing my passions and my passion projects with the community is when that was so evident. And it's no surprise that that mindset shift changed how well I performed at work because I wasn't scrutinizing every single action or every single meeting. I was just having fun with it. I was just saying, you know what, like, okay, I might make a fool of myself by saying this one thing, but it's still an improvement, right? And that really kind of opened doors in terms of my ability to perform, but also opened doors professionally. I think after I started making data science fun for myself, after I started making work fun for myself, that's when coincidentally, all the opportunities started coming my way. That's when kind of I started interviewing at Fang, at Disney, and eventually chose Disney for the senior data science role. Um, like I said, I think Disney was a great opportunity because one, I like entertainment. I think it's really fun data. I think that's really important to figure out what kind of data do you actually want to interact with. Um, Fun data, and this specific portion of Disney allowed me to kind of create my own data science roadmap, which you don't really get that opportunity, right? I get to kind of dictate what types of projects I should be working on, which, like I said, it's you don't really get to come by that sort of opportunity. So I definitely took that, and I don't regret it in the slightest, right? I think you'd imagine there's so many different opportunities, so many different interesting companies you could work at, but like I said, I am just so happy where I'm at right now, and I don't really foresee myself leaving anytime soon. So now jumping into notable projects. So I'll put this back on the screen. So in case you want to probe a specific project, unless it's proprietary, I don't mind answering the most granular details. But you'll notice I highlight these green and red based off which ones are personal or professional. I want to highlight, and this is not an exaggeration at all of these projects equally contribute in every new opportunity I get, right? And I think the key takeaway based on that statement is what I've done in my personal life and what I've done at work both matter equally, right? And that's why I strongly encourage everyone to continue to build their portfolios, even if they're in a job that is technically a great data science job. If you want a great position at Fang, right, I think you need to do stuff like this. I think this is why you need to broaden your kind of project portfolio to things that are not just what you do at work. To highlight a few, right? You see the two NLP ones right in the middle, the ones that are kind of larger, comparing text summarization techniques. This movie does not exist. These are, like I said, just random ideas that I had that end up turning into kind of these projects that provide a lot of publicity, kind of that really helped me out, that recruiters actually noticed. This movie does not exist. It's kind of fun. It was a text generation project where I took the entire Netflix catalog and um, trained it or fine tuned a GPT-2 model to generate brand new Netflix movies or TV shows. I think this one's hilarious that I always mention. Overcome with emotion, emotion alone, childhood rivals who seduce each other, fall in love, and start a futuristic dating app. I feel like that cracks me up every time I say it because I mean, based off what I'm seeing on Netflix, I could literally see this being something they like release soon. On the flip side, when I talk about professional projects, I think this one right here, this prescription forecasting, I think this was so critical because it really, I worked on this in my most naive data scientist state. I think I didn't really know much about a lot of assumptions, etc. And what this helped me do is build a project from end to end, obviously with help from other data scientists. But this helped me, taking a step back, what we try to do here is say, can we predict the number of prescriptions a, a physician will make for a specific drug in the next month? And what we wanted to do with that information is give it into sales reps' hands so that they know, hey, this physician's probably a more likely position to convert so that I could sell more this month, right? That changed the script. It's so different from how sales reps actually function. So building a model, all of that feature engineering, all of that model hyperparameter choosing, model selection, the A/B testing to see are these predictions even helpful? Um, all of that was like just such a enlightening process to understand like how to actually build a model that works in practice, right? I think you see Kaggle competitions, etc. But this was that one instance where I took all of my learning and put it into hands of someone who is going to use an output of a model, right? I think once you do that, you start to realize the power of kind of a data science model, which I think was super enlightening. There's a couple here, recommendation engine. I think at Movies Anywhere, where I'm working at right now, which is obviously in Disney, building a recommendation engine from scratch has been just absolute blast. Like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time here. I see a lot of questions are coming through. but we can hop back here if you guys have questions or a specific question or a specific project. So this is one piece of advice I try to give as frequently as possible. So I actually created a slide for it to make sure like it's just front and center. There are a couple things that I always recommend when marketing yourself, right? Projects are a dime a dozen, right? Your portfolio is a dime a dozen, right? But a GitHub is pretty common. I always recommend people to do something like a little like above and beyond to really market themselves. So what I recommend is use Medium to take all of your projects to the next step, right? And by that, so you might build like a sports model or etc., right? Excuse me. I would take that and highlight exactly all the assumptions that were baked into your model. Highlight where you ran into obstacles, how you overcame those obstacles, your end results, how you would improve your model moving forward. Showcasing that process in a concise article is just the most impressive thing you can do as someone trying to enter the field, right? I think it's so great because you're writing in a way that highlights your communication skills, right? As I mentioned in point 3, that article highlights not only your technical skills and what went into the project, it highlights your ability to communicate. What people don't realize is being a data scientist is 50%, 60% communication, interacting with stakeholders, etc., right? Writing these articles immediately showcases your ability to do that, which you can't downplay how important that is as someone looking to get into data science. It's great because if it's not, I want to say layman's terms, but written in a way that not the non-technical folks can understand, recruiters will love that, right? If recruiters can relate to the output you're producing, I think they're going to be more likely to interact with you, right? Then on the flip side, LinkedIn, I think these are subtle things, but engineering your description and include relevant keywords so that you're actually like you're showing up in a lot more search results. Post frequently. I mean, the network effect is live and real. If more people are interacting with your content, that means other people can see it. Better for you. Number 3 is critical. Reach out to experienced data scientists like myself for advice. I'm going to put in bold for advice, right? There's a serious difference from saying, hey, I'm seeing this position at your company and I would love for just some advice on what it takes to actually be in that position, or what is the day-to-day like in that position, and how would you prepare for in that position, right? That's coming at it from a perspective of mentorship and for advice to better yourself. Now, on the flip side, which I see all too often, you'll see, hey, I see you have this position. Here's my resume. Can I have a job? Right? I think this isn't even a hyperbole. You see the difference in how much more abrasive one of those is versus the other, right? And I think it's really important that you don't come at it from an abrasive way, because even if I don't have a position open, if you come at it from a perspective of mentorship, I'm more likely to share your information with someone else who might be looking for a mentee or might be looking for someone in their team. It's really important, right? I think, I mean, this sounds cheesy, but think of it like a dating app, right? Like you want to like court someone, right? Make sure you're not coming off abrasive. Like I said, I think I can't harp on that enough because it is just so often. I think I get all these messages where people are just posting in a message, an email to myself with a resume. I don't care how qualified you are. If you're just sending me a resume without even like chatting a bit or like talking about what you're coming from, I'm not inclined to even open your resume. This is my thought process. My colleagues have felt the same, but yeah, I think definitely keep that in mind. That's my initial tips for now. One thing I will mention, so we've had quite a few of these sessions and I have been around the block and I think my perspective is useful, but I'm not the only perspective, right? So next Thursday, we're going to have a guest speaker who I've been chatting to quite a bit, who I've met throughout these initiatives. Keith, he is a lead data scientist at Verizon, and he shares kind of my enthusiasm for giving back. So next session, we're going to have him kind of talk about his journey, and then the both of us will be kind of sharing and answering all of your questions. So it'll be great. You'll have different perspectives, answering all of your questions, sharing kind of, yeah, we work on very different data sets. So I think it'll be really great because now you guys will be able to hear from really different kind of types of data scientists. What I will do is in the chat, 1 second, I'll post attendees. Here's the registration link. There you go. So register when you guys can get a chance. I think I'm going to be posting on Reddit again. I think it seemed like what I've heard is people want me to post the Monday before any session on Reddit. So I'll continue to do so because I think that was kind of the best fit for you guys. But on LinkedIn, etc., I'll make sure that you guys are aware of any future sessions. So definitely I'll update you guys on this upcoming session. Like I said, this is the first time having a guest speaker, and I guess I can't be more excited about this. It's super awesome. Lastly, before I jump into the actual kind of Q&A portion, there's a few pieces of content that I want to share. Milan, if you could put that in the chat again, I'd really appreciate it. So like line by line, I actually go from kind of the middle. If you haven't requested me on LinkedIn yet, feel free to do so. Some of you probably have, some of you have sent me messages. I try to make myself as accessible and available as possible. So your best bet to interact with me and kind of see all the content that I'm sharing is through my LinkedIn. And like I said, I'm an open book and I will accept every invitation and try to get to as many questions as possible. If for any reason I don't get to your question, just realize I am getting a ton of questions that come in. I think just from the Reddit post, I think I had about 500 in mail. So I have a full-time job also, so definitely bear with me as I try to wade through all your questions. Second, I'll kind of highlight this blog that I'm putting together. So this is definitely core to my heart and my biggest passion project at the moment. I really want this to end up being this useful resource for anyone trying to get into data science or data in general, right? You guys may have seen this yet. If you haven't, I encourage you to take a look. I want this to be just useful content for you guys, right? This is anything from how to prepare for interviews, me highlighting kind of how I dealt with imposter syndrome, my perspective on data science certificates. We're gonna have our Q&A content, what kinds of data science projects, the day-to-day as a data scientist. And the content here is gonna be really fun. Honestly, what I'm gonna end up doing is also doing mock interviews to really give you guys my live feedback of what people are doing right and wrong in our interview, right? The applications here are limitless, and I really think this will be the one-stop shop for you to help feel confident going into an interview, building your portfolio, etc. Right? It's just starting, but your feedback and your input is going to be invaluable in terms of making this useful to you all. And lastly, before we actually get into the questions, I want to highlight this group that we put together. So, wow, okay, seems like you guys have already got into this, right? This is going to be a lot of fun, and we're just getting this started, but this is going to be the community for aspiring data scientists, right? And I'm not trying to be salesy, but because it's free and something I really want to be useful to you all. But the way I see this, and just giving you some examples, right? I think, let's see this one, right? So we had a post sharing what types of projects that we're working on, right? And say Sankalp asked how I'm going to approach this, right? And I highlighted kind of how I want to go about doing this, right? Nathaniel kind of highlighted a project he's working on, right? and then Paul, they engaged with each other on that. Marino was talking about this really interesting recommendation engine to tie resumes to job descriptions. I think what's going to be fun is this is going to end up being a place where we can collaborate on projects, right? Finding other people to collaborate with on a project, right? Showcasing a project you work on so that the people in this community can provide feedback or ask questions. Oh, why did you do things this way, right? This, I don't know, I feel like I'm being really aspirational when I'm looking at this, but I really see this as this like forum for everyone to engage each other, to learn with each other. Because it's tough, right? I think I struggled because I didn't really have a community to bounce ideas off of, even collaborate with, right? And I hope this mitigates that uncomfort for anyone trying to get into data science. That was my spiel, and I hope that didn't come off too campy, but I hope you realize I'm pretty sincere about this, and I do want this to be as helpful as possible, and I hope you do find this super useful. If not, definitely let me know how we can make this more useful to you guys. With that in mind, I think we'll now open it up to the Q&A. Wow, we've already had 24 questions come in. I'm sure more questions will come as we go, but let's get it started.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get started. Really quickly, just do want to mention, we do have some questions that were dismissed. This is because you guys have asked similar questions that are also within the queue. If you guys feel like your question wasn't adequately answered, you guys would like more information, we'll ask you guys to reach out to Madhav on LinkedIn for that. So that's kind of just a heads up on the dismissed questions. All right, so let's get started. Once again, just want to say, hopefully I don't pronounce anybody's name wrong, but if I do, please forgive me. So yeah, let's get started. The first question is, what education backgrounds do you guys have? Do you have any recommendation for someone who did not have a bachelor degree in data science, but is thinking of switching careers?
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar position. It was a technical degree, but not data science related at all. You could do a wide variety of things. You can self-learn. I think there's so many resources out there, which I've included in the blog, right? You can do certificates and then build your portfolio in a way that's so robust that you showcase kind of your skill set. You can do boot camps or anything along those lines. I think they're very useful, and I have colleagues who come from boot camps and that are doing really well. Or you could go kind of the route I went to and actually get your master's and build your data science skill set that way. Both and all of those options are all equally credible, and whatever fits your personality, your necessities, etc. Right? I think you have to figure out which way you prefer to learn and then kind of go that route. But not having a technical or not having a data science bachelor's is not a hindrance at all, because I think I'm a testament to that. It's not an obstacle at all.
Great, thank you for your question. Next from Praneeth. Hi, Madhav, thanks for this opportunity. What project skills do you think have the biggest impact in getting a data science position?
Yeah, so I'm gonna focus on the skills, right? I don't think projects matters as much. I think the skills is what you really want to showcase when you're kind of building your portfolio. What I recommend is think of a project end to end, right? So let's think about a data science project you might be doing in the workforce. You're going to get maybe messy data, or you're going to get a data set. First step is exploratory data analysis, right? Exploring the data, figuring out what features you want, cleaning the data, right? Showcase that when you're building projects, right? Next step is your feature engineering. Do like relatively complex feature engineering. Be clever with the features that you create, right? Then the modeling portion, your project should showcase your model selection, why you chose that model, why not any other model, right? After that, results analysis, performance metrics, why you chose a certain metric. And then after that, presenting your results. And that could be a Medium article. Doing that, showing your SQL skills, your Python skills, all in that order is what will give you the biggest impact. Because think about it from a hiring manager or a recruiter's perspective. If you really showcase that in a Medium article, you've essentially shown them, wow, this guy knows how to think in terms of a productional or a, a data scientist in our organization. You could think like that, and he can deliver. He has shown that he knows how to think through every step of the project. So when they're hiring you or thinking about interviewing you, you seem like that much more of a credible candidate.
Thank you, Praneeth. Next question, a simple one. Is a data scientist different from a data analyst?
Yeah, definitely. I think the way I like to look at it is, and this is very different from organization to organization. So for the data analysts in here, right? I hope I'm not saying anything that's offensive, but I've noticed data analysts are very retrospective. Sure, they're thinking strategic, but the analysis and the work that's being done is relatively retrospective, looking at what's been happening in the past. Data scientists, I think, are building things that are more strategically forward thinking. So a predictive model that is forecasting transactions, forecasting prescriptions, recommendation engine that is predicting what you'll want to watch, right? I think that's where it really differs. I also think the technical skill sets are a little more advanced for a data scientist. Both probably need really strong SQL skills, but data analysts are probably going to be more well versed in your BI and your visualization tools like say Tableau, etc. Whereas data scientists are going to be really, I think, more well versed with the AWS suite, EMR, SageMaker. They're going to be more well versed with Python, PySpark. I think that's where you'll see a lot of distinction between the two groups. Now, that's not to say they don't merge a lot. I think I have seen many data analysts that are more than qualified to be a data scientist, right? I think it's just what I've seen in the past.
Great, thank you for that question. Next from Peter, just doing a quick search on the Disney job portal, I think that all the current postings for data-related jobs are in New York. What is the main office or department up there? Has COVID opened up the possibility of distributed work opportunities or work from home?
Yeah, so they do have a lot of Disney Plus jobs out there. So that's probably some of them that you're seeing. Yeah, so that's kind of the answer to your first question. I know they have quite a bit of stuff, but I know a lot of the Disney Plus jobs are there. In terms of distributed work and work from home, across the board, I think it's being more and more welcomed. I think you probably have seen a lot of things like Google, Microsoft, Slack, I think was also one that is now allowing 100% work from home. Definitely with COVID, I think what people have realized, and even on our organization, we've realized that as a team, we can be just as or even more productive, during COVID. So they realized, do we really even need to have people be on the office all the time? So yeah, I think COVID has opened up a ton of work from home opportunities. At Disney, they haven't really said that yet, but across the board, for sure.
Thank you, Peter. Next, we have, as a current co-op undergrad, do you think it's better to depend on your marks or grades or side projects? For data science specifically, what might be some good projects in ML or artificial intelligence?
So to answer your first question, I think after a certain point, your GPA doesn't matter that much. In my eyes, I mean, there might be some folks that it does. I'm just speaking from my perspective. Yeah, I think like after like I forgot what it was for like most jobs, but I think after like a 3.5, I think no one really cared. I don't remember, but things might have changed. After 3.5, people don't care. After that, it's like, what can you actually do? So it's a combination of both. But after a certain point, I think your side projects is what really differentiates you. It's tough to say what's a good project. I think I mentioned when I responded to Praneeth, I think a project that showcases your skill sets end to end for a job that you might be applying for is what really matters. So that, I think that's like what's really important versus like a specific topic or project. Obviously, if you work on something that's clever, interesting, that gets a lot of attention, that's good for the reason that it gets you attention. So recruiters will probably see you. So like that's also a way to think about it, is like, what's a clever thing? So like, I don't know, deep fakes are really big right now, right? So if you build an interesting project around a deep fake and it got a lot of attention on like Reddit and LinkedIn, and you're now quote unquote gone viral, that attention will help you kind of get exposure to more recruiters. But yeah, that's kind of my two perspective, my two like ways to perceive that.
For sure. Let's go on to the next question. Praneeth is asking, what are some of the most used skills you experience in a large company like Disney?
I would say SQL, Python, PySpark, and then communication, which means like building slides and building documents, right? I think you probably won't, I don't know if you'd be expecting that last one, but at a large company that's not, it is tech focused, but not as tech focused as a Facebook, you are responsible for showcasing results, showcasing methodology to people who aren't technical at all. So being able to explain things in a way that is easy to understand, but also like highlights why it's important is really important, right? I think it's a huge skill. So that is definitely something I'm using while at Disney on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Praneeth. Next from James, a little background about him. Hi there, my name is Beckham Sturgill. I'm an industrial engineer senior at the University of Florida, and I'm currently interning as a manufacturing engineer. But I would like to really break into a more data science related role. To break in, I'm currently looking for data science related internships next fall. I'm considering getting my master's in data science or analytics. Do you think this is the right thing to do? I'm also taking on projects to improve my portfolio and GitHub. Any other suggestions that you would have to break into data science?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for kind of introducing yourself and sharing your background. So to answer your first part, if you have, say, the means, the time, there's no pressure for you to work right away, I would say take it slow and get your master's, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's kind of a nice, like, regimented way to kind of get the skills you need. So yeah, I think that's my answer. If there is pressure to start working right away, then maybe do like boot camps and build your portfolio your own way. In terms of improving your portfolio GitHub, I think it's great that you're doing that. What I would do, and kind of what I mentioned in this presentation, is make sure you're showcasing your projects in a insightful way. Like, and that means, what was it, like in a Medium article, right? And like maybe building a blog that's easy to kind of go through. That's all really important. So taking your projects that next step, that takes it from just code in a GitHub page to a digestible either web page or article. Both of those are super, it's a super good way to kind of take your portfolio next step. I would say you're probably, and to answer your last question, I would say you're probably doing the right steps, but outreach is also important. So you're taking all the steps to build your skill set, to build your portfolio, but then also reaching out to experienced data scientists, right? I think what I tried to do, and it was different time, obviously I was going to networking events, etc., meetups, but what I would like to do, what I always did was kind of ask someone, hey, like, you're in a position that I want to be in at the end of the day. Can we hop on a call for 15 minutes? I just probe, right? Like, learn more about you and build a relationship. Do that as much as you can, because building a substantial network, right? Not just a network that you could say, oh, we connected and we're a connection, right? I meant like actually talking to someone, building that relationship is something you could really do in the meantime while you're building your skill set. Because yeah, you don't downplay how influential a useful connection can be.
Thank you, James. Next from Aaron, have you ever implemented a relatively recent or state-of-the-art model into your pipelines or workflow? And if so, what was the process for doing so?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if I'm thinking state-of-the-art, it's still relatively new. I would say last year, 2 years, I'm thinking, right? It's the Universal Sentence Encoder built by Google. It's like, for those that aren't aware, it's pretty much a sentence embedding model to vectorize text in a highly, highly semantic way. I think it's like close to state of the art in terms of your ability to understand the semantics of a passage or etc. And what we used was, we tried to create a way to find similar movies for our platform. And on top of using all the metadata, et cetera, I used that model to vectorize the long synopsis, which is like a summary of the movie. I vectorized that long synopsis to also add this layer of comparability to figure out, are the synopsis similar, and to add to, are the metadata similar, right? I think it was this interesting kind of addition to figuring out, are movies actually similar? So yeah, that was kind of, we experimented, we realized that it did add substantial value in terms of the quality results that we're providing. And then in terms of process, it was first just done on a Jupyter notebook just to figure out, does this work on a small scale? And then to scale, we ended up using kind of Airflow. We built it into our entire kind of end-to-end pipeline, which is now being used in production. The pipeline itself was strict AWS, exactly what you'd imagine. We have a DAG that kind of scheduled everything on a daily basis and is exposed it's exposed for kind of, and we also built it so that those vectors are leverageable for any other project. So now it's kind of this module that people can use if they need to analyze movies on their own, right? So it's kind of cool. I think when you're building an end-to-end pipeline, you want to think of things as modules so that if for some reason in the future you might need to use that analysis or that piece of the data science puzzle, someone could easily pull from that. Because if it's strict and rigid, then you end up shooting yourself in the foot when you're kind of building your building any subsequent project. I think I kind of went on a tangent, but I hope that was insightful or useful.
Thank you, Aaron. Next from Alejandro. Hi, I've been looking for a master's program and I would like to know what's your opinion on mathematics and data science and data engineering and analytics for someone with a civil engineering background. I'm trying to get into a German university if you happen to know any good ones.
Yeah, Nikolai, yeah, I imagine it is pretty late. I appreciate you joining. As I mentioned, we're recording this. I'm going to send an email out to everyone with YouTube link. So for everything you don't miss, I hope you are able to check out the rest of it later. And I also want to mention to you guys, right? So we're at 42 questions and it's 6:22. I don't anticipate I'll get to every question, but we are logging everything. And what I will probably do is record myself answering all the questions I didn't get to, just to provide this kind of provide the responses that you guys be looking for. Yeah, and yeah, I'll definitely do that for you guys. Going back to the question, you put these in quotes, and just so I'm understanding, is that a specific program or is that a book that you're looking to research? Can you mind like providing kind of a follow-up answer to that? Are these specific programs in the German university?
Yeah, it looks like it's a specific program Alejandro has written in chat.
Okay, cool. What I always like to say is, first off, these two are probably going to be very, data engineering is probably going to get nitty gritty into ETL pipelines, actually grabbing data from raw sources, aggregating it, and making it useful to data analysts or data scientists. Or so that, I think that's going to be your more object-oriented programming, your really highly technical role. Mathematics and data science, I think, is going to probably equip you probably more for a data science role. Both, I think, are great, but you just have to figure out what you'd prefer and what really is more important to you. I think that's kind of the first part of the question. But if you want to be a data scientist and say a similar role as myself or a lot of other like large corporations, you want to make sure when you look at a curriculum, you're going to be able to understand at the end of this whole program, the pros and cons to certain models, assumptions that go into certain models, why you'd want to tune parameters in a certain way, why certain parameters make a difference, why you'd want to transform features in a certain way. These sorts of questions and answers you should be constantly, like the dialogue you should have internally when approaching every problem is important, right? If you could do that well, then you're going to be a successful data scientist, right? Because anyone who's a product manager, marketing, they're going to start probing, and your ability to answer those questions in a concise, insightful way is what's going to make you go from a good to a great data scientist. Um, so when you're looking at any program, I would think about it from that lens and figure out, is this program going to give me that? If you think it will, then I would say go for it. Um, Hope I answer your question.
Thank you, Alejandro. Next from Kelly, is it worth applying to job postings you see on Indeed or LinkedIn if you don't have any connections?
It's always worth posting, right? It's always worth applying. There's no harm in that at all. I recommend reaching out, right? Like there's also no harm in reaching out to the recruiter, right? Or reaching out to someone who's in a similar position and just probing. Be like, don't say, this goes back to my third point, right? Don't say, hey, I saw this posting, can you hire me, right? Like, don't say that, but you could say, hey, like I saw this position, it seems really interesting. Can you give me some tips, or like, what's your ideal candidate for this, right? Like, what are you actually looking for? I think that comes at a perspective of, hey, I'm just looking for advice. I want to get there. Maybe I'm there now, maybe I'm not, but I just like to get your feedback. That's always a great option on top of applying. It's always worth doing. I think doing anything, it's always worth it, right? Like, don't underestimate just doing, right? Anything you do will come back in the long term. I strongly believe that. It's a bit of a cliche, but I strongly believe it.
Thank you, Kelly. Next from Andrew, how did you approach data science consulting as a newly minted data scientist?
It's funny. I approached it from a very naive perspective. I was like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. Maybe like me being cocky at the moment, like, oh, I'm a data scientist now. I'm a genius, right? Like, I was just like, I thought it was just going to be a breeze, but then it was an absolutely rude awakening. Like, if you read my imposter syndrome article, I think I just like ignored the fact that, oh, I'm going to now be tasked to work on 3, 4 projects on a very competitive environment, where I ignored all that. And I think I suffered from that at all. I think I really, like, I'm telling you, those like first 6 months were like dark. I like, it was probably a mild case of depression, like self-diagnosed depression. It was like rough. I really kind of was frustrated with myself. Um, so I'm sure that didn't seem encouraging for anyone who wanted to go into data science consulting. But what was helpful is I had great mentors that helped me along the path. I had one-on-one sessions with my managers to help me out. Yeah, and then slowly I realized I was improving. I kind of highlighted like skills that I knew I was very strong at, and slowly things got better. If I were to go back in time, I think I would have spent so much more time kind of studying in the beginning, like breaking down any new project that was coming my way. Like, if I knew a project was coming down, like down the pipeline 2 months from now, I would have started studying right then and there, just so I was prepared when the project started. Um, yeah, I think that would the advice I would give to anyone like potentially going to data science consulting is, don't underestimate the volume of work and the volume of technical work that's coming your way, right? Be wary of that. I hope I answered your question. I hope it didn't discourage you from going into data science consulting.
Thank you, Andrew. I think this question is similar from Praneeth. What was the process like to get your first data science position at ZS? Which skills, tools, projects were important to stand out?
So I networked, right? So I think the ability, like reaching out to people, interacting with people, kind of getting people to refer me, that's what got me kind of the lead into ZS. And then the skills and tools, I think what helped me out was my enthusiasm for my passion projects. I think at the end of my tenure, I became very close to the guy who hired me. And so we had a candid conversation. And yeah, he was like, look, you weren't the most technically sound candidate, but you had this strong passion for data and your ability to communicate well. So we thought you'd be a great fit. So my enthusiasm and my passion for creating projects on my own was what really made me stand out.
Thank you, Praneeth. Next from Giordano, your projects seem to use large amounts of data. When you start one, do you host them locally or do you use a cloud solution?
Yeah, if it's a so if I'm working with transactions or movie views, I'm gonna not do it locally. I don't think I could, right? Like I have a 16 gig MacBook Pro, and I feel like most mainstream like corporations, that's what they'll stick you like start you with, and this won't run anything. I wouldn't even be able to run even basic SQL queries. So I've been working on like SageMaker, EMR, and aggregating data there. Athena is amazing for using SQL to aggregate data. So any exploration is all done there. And I think it works for most corporations.
Thank you, Giordano. Next from Saran, I'm in my final year of college, and even though I work in some data science projects, I just don't feel comfortable enough to write entire code on my own. I have problems encoding a neural network from scratch. So my question is, how could I really improve my programming abilities when it comes to data science projects or deep learning projects?
It's all momentum, right? So just start anywhere, right? Start anywhere and make it end to end, right? If like even outside of deep learning or even for deep learning, right? Like build a really arbitrary, like find a data set that's the most simple, the Titanic data set on Kaggle, right? It's the most simple data set on there. Take that data set, don't transform anything, and just feed it into a feed-forward neural network using Keras, PyTorch, whatever you'd like, and generate results, right? Start there, right? It doesn't have to be amazing right off the bat. You just need to build momentum, right? So now you built this original model and your results are pretty terrible, right? Then you iterate, right? Then you say, oh, maybe I'll try a different model, or maybe I'll add another layer, or I'll add more nodes in a single layer, or I'll have a certain amount of dropout. If I'm going to focus on deep learning since it seems interesting to you, I'll add a bit of dropout, right? Or I'll change our regularization functions, right? These are all ways for you to iterate on your own and to learn, right? Don't like, I've been talking about the end result and showcasing results, but the iteration within a project is really, really useful, right? Just playing around with parameters, layers, etc., and understanding how that's affecting your results. When you learn that, it's invaluable because now you know, oh, I'm running into this issue. I should probably make these changes and I'll get better results. And that's what you want as a great data scientist, right? So just start small, right? I think if you're into like NLP, just build something that's like a really basic sentiment classifier, right? Or if you're into computer vision, do like a cat dog one, right? Really simple. Don't focus on an optimized solution, just focus on building something. And then you're kind of going to put yourself in a good position. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of the advice I would give you, right? Just build momentum, right? It's just inertia. The more you do, the more confident you will be about taking a blank piece of paper and start building, right? It's always difficult at the start, but just take a step by step. One more one more piece of advice. Kaggle is a great method for you to build up that momentum because what you'll notice is for every data set, for every project, they have kernels with people kind of starting and building kind of like entry level code or building like educational code. You can always use that to get yourself started as well. That's a great resource to kind of learn and get your feet off the ground.
Thank you, Saran. Next question from Jamal. How do you communicate your work or findings without talking over the heads of some of your non-technical audiences?
Really write a full script. Julian, exactly, right? I think if you guys follow like memes, like the amount of copy and pasting from Stack Overflow into production code is just always there, right? Like there's nothing harm in that, right? Thanks, Julian. I really appreciate that note. How do you communicate your work and your findings without talking over the heads? That is such a great question. It doesn't get asked nearly enough. I think your ability to do this well means you're going to be a superstar or be someone who kind of is just left to code things but not given a ton of responsibility. My philosophy to this is make things simple enough so that anyone can really understand it, but sprinkle some technical terms and technical jargon or technical illustrations that showcases your value, right? This sounds sleazy, but what you want to do is get it to a way where they understand what you did, but also that they understand, wow, this is so complex that they can't do it. So it shows your value, but also shows what you actually did, right? It checks every box that they need in order to feel confident in you and what you've provided. So what I like to do is like provide with a very high level summary, right? And I also like I think about really easy like visualizations, right? A very simple visualization showing like, oh, data was processed here, put into a model and outputted, right? And then a couple points about why this model is so complex and useful. They're not going to really understand it, but they're going to be like, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. And then picking a performance metric that is useful, but also they can understand it, right? The one example I like to use is, okay, I have a classification model, right? And in my classification model, I can use many different performance metrics, or F1, F2, score, precision, recall. I typically like using F1, F2 to really look at and optimize my model against, right? But I'm not gonna like F1, F2 like harmonic means of precision and recall, right? I'm not gonna try to explain that to a non-technical audience, even though that's the metric I use to optimize my model. I would just show them precision and recall. These are rudimentary terms that everyone is kind of aware of. So that's kind of one of those like decisions you make to make sure you're showcasing that the model performs well, but with metrics that they can understand. These are a few examples. I hope that that answers your question, because that's a great question. Seriously, like it's not talked about enough and it's super critical. I think I'd love this question so much. I'm probably write a blog post on this. It's like it's so important. Thanks for asking.
We'll make that note in the when
Yeah,
we're
definitely.
thank you, Jamal. Really great question. Next from Macaulay. How do you network and make friends in the field? Not search for a job, but for people to talk to on the weekends to share your passion about. For some context, I'm very young in the field. I had amazing teachers and one-on-one classes, and then self-taught with some universities. Although I've been working for a while for a famous company doing some really fun projects, I struggle to make any connections. What are some tips for finding some cool communities and being able to chat with all the awesome folks?
Yeah, so I'm not sure where you're located, but things like Meetup, Eventbrite, those are all really useful. Obviously, after COVID has, if it does calm down, I think that is a very useful resource, something I'd use regularly. In the meantime, and I'm not trying to like throw in or like be like salesy, but I think the community we're trying to build really looks to address this question. Whether or not it does it, like I'm gonna be like candid here, it might flounder, right? But if we can get enough people in there, get enough dialogue going, get enough people interacting with each other, I really think it'll provide that resource for you, especially in the time of COVID, right? Um, you'll notice in that same, I'll actually show you here, right? Like I encourage all of you guys, right? Like, what is it? Like this brief description, right? I think this is just initial testament of how this could be used, right? All these people providing an introduction, right? It's just an open community. I encourage all you guys to connect everyone with everyone else that's there, right? That's just a way for you to build your network, right? And interact with people, talk to them there. This is just a start. I'm sure we'll find really interesting ideas for us to like interact with each other, but I hope this can solve that issue. If this isn't up your alley, definitely Meetup, Eventbrite, etc. Those are super useful in the mean, like when things get back to normal.
Thank you, Macaulay. Really great question. Next from Julian, how are projects usually kicked off at Disney? Are business partners generally informed about the data science capabilities, or are they coming with the general problems and leading on you to spec out the deliverable?
Wow, these are phenomenal questions because your first and second questions are just so important. And if they're aware the DS capability is also really, really important, right? And just to give some background, right? If your team isn't aware of what data science can do, what DS capabilities there are, they're going to have a limited scope in terms of the ideas they even generate, right? So it's funny, if you're in a team that where data science is relatively new, it's not only your job to build solutions. See you, Dawson. Thanks for attending. So sorry, I lost train of thought, but if they have that limited mindset, right, they're not going to really know what problems they should work on, right? So if you're in a new team, your job is not only going to be to do the development, but it's going to be to actually educate and explain what data science capabilities can do, right? So if you're in a similar position, what I have done is I call them lunch and learns. And what I'll do is essentially talk about predictive modeling, or I'll talk about customer segmentation, right? And I'll just showcase industry use cases, the approach, etc., right? And the goal is to spark ideas in their mind, like, oh wow, I didn't know this was even possible in to do, right? I didn't even know you could do this with our data, right? Oh, what if we try this, right? That is really important in terms of working more upstream and getting them to think about more interesting problem statements, right? That's what I try to do to facilitate more interesting like ideation. But at the end of the day, it'll be marketing, product management who really come up with the idea, or work with data science to come up with the idea. And then we'll end up moving forward, right? So what'll happen is you'll have a meeting where either I'll have an idea and I'll go to product, or product will have an idea, they'll come to me, and we'll just discuss like, is it even feasible from a data science perspective? Then what we'll do is, okay, it is, but we should probably break it into a crawl, walk, run. Like here's a low hanging fruit implementation of that. More difficult, this is blue sky, right? We break it down so that now when we're presenting it to leadership, we have like a tangible roadmap that is helpful for them to get on board with. But that's kind of how we typically not showcase, but build new features. Great question.
Thank you, Julian. Next from Gabriel, I'm currently working as a layout or hardware engineer, and I'm thinking of moving into systems validation and debug job while I finish my master's in data science to get more programming experience. Do you think this is a good idea in terms of careers?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, right? First off, you're getting your master's in data science, so you're like, you're gonna get the foundation you need, right? I think what would be interesting is, can you take some of your data science skills and some of the stuff you learned in your program and apply it to your existing job, right? That would be amazing. And I would see if you encourage you to do that. The debug job, I think that might be great because you might be more hands-on with code. So yeah, hands-on with code. So that's also really useful, right? I think it just showcases that you have like more insight there.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Sorry, I saw some messages coming in, but Benedict, we're gonna pretty much like take the recording and provide annotations with timestamp with the question that was asked. We're gonna process that, and I'll likely share that with everyone probably by Monday, or we'll see over the weekend. I'll let you guys know.
Great. Let's continue on. Next question from Vi. What are some of your tips to brainstorm creative projects to work on that are not super convoluted, but also interesting enough for people to take notice?
Before I get to that question, I wanna, if you guys can in the chat, I should have created a poll, but it's gonna take a little while. Would you guys want me to create just a standalone video with myself answering all the questions I didn't get to. Is that something that would interest you, or should I just, I don't know, wait for the next Q&A session? Let me know, like just say yes or no in the chat. Let's just like go through and see like what everyone's preference is. Okay, seems like it's predominantly yes. So that sounds good. So maybe I'll do that as well between, at some point, I'll just take all the questions that I haven't gotten to and just provide responses.
Great. I'll just restate Vi's question. What are some of
Yeah,
your tips to What are some of your tips to brainstorm creative projects to work on that are not super convoluted, but are also interesting enough for people to take notice?
Look, this sounds so cliche, but like just look inwards. What are your interests, right? What, like literally, what is your interest? Are you interested in a certain sport? Are you interested in a certain industry? Start there and then kind of construct a problem there, right? If it's, what I've noticed, it's easy to come up with a problem to work on when it's about an industry or interest of yours, right? Like I'm a huge soccer fan, right? Or football fan for those that are in non-US countries. So, and I'm a big Messi fan. So for me, it was really interesting. Oh, you know what? Like I've always been curious, how would Messi do if he played in a different league? So that was an easy way for me to create a problem statement, right? And that is how I created that project. Similarly, so like I knew I was interested in like text generation, and I was like, you know what? Like I love Netflix data. Like it would be fun to see if I could play around with that. And that's how that problem was created, right? Start with your interests and then go from there. And I think when you start writing about your interest and you start diving into a project, it's something you're really interested in, it really comes out when you actually start building things, and when people start reading your article, like people can just feel your interest, and it's just more endearing and captivating when people see that. So that's kind of the tip I would give.
Thank you, Vi. Great question. Next from Brandon, is it feasible for someone from the UK to get a junior data science role in the US?
The thing is, I don't really know. I'm sorry, Brandon. I wish I had a better answer for you. I don't know. I'll do some research, and if you guys can note this question, I'll do some research and I'll come back to you with a good answer. I'll talk to some colleagues as well. Yeah, I want to answer this question for you. Also, I know UK has a ton of interesting positions. I know like every big tech company has jobs out there. So I'm sure you could find a bunch of opportunities there, but I'll definitely come back to you with a good answer.
Question is noted, Brandon. Thank you. Next from Brian, I love these types of questions. Hi, Madhav, what are your thoughts on the ethics in model creation? For example, the prescription forecasting project you mentioned, that sounds extremely dangerous in the hands of an aggressive pharmaceutical sales rep who is trying to grow the market share without regard of the price of prescriptions for consumers, or the nuances of off-label medication usage. How can we, as data practitioners, ensure that we do not create models that can cause harm while they ruthlessly optimize a narrow metric?
Wow, that is a phenomenal question. I think as a data scientist, I think you just make sure you're not inherently providing any bias into the model, right? And so with that, we just used as much data as possible. We weren't using like a subset of physicians. Everything was as generalized as possible so that we're just understanding prescribing behavior, right? I think from that perspective, we felt like, okay, we're ethically ethically sound, right? And I think what's really important in that position, because you're as a data practitioner, you're just trying to provide a solution, right? What ends up being the issue is the people consuming it, or your clients that are overly aggressive and just trying to what's called get more prescriptions, even though it's not like without regards, like you said, without regards to whether or not it's actually helpful to that prescriber or that patient. You really have to push back. I think that's where your job as a data scientist and your job as a role of like solidifying ethics in data is so critical, right? And so the ways we did that for that problem is we didn't even showcase a physician. We put a physician pretty low to the, like, essentially low to our recommendations if they didn't meet certain thresholds in our model output, right? Like, there's a difference between, oh, we think the model thinks that they're going to prescribe versus the model thinks they need the drug, right? You notice how that shift in questioning goes from I'm just trying to make a ton of money versus I'm trying to get it into the hands of the people who need it, right? These are really important ways to shift the problem in a way that makes it more ethical. That's a phenomenal question and something that people deal with regularly. And on a similar vein, I think if you guys haven't seen the documentary The Social Dilemma, I strongly recommend it. It really highlights the social ethics for a lot of our big tech social media companies and how the business model has pretty much threw ethics out the window. If you want to take back some homework, watching that documentary is something that I totally recommend. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you, Brian. Next question from Chris. I'm a little unclear about the longevity of the data science role in a company. As in, what comes next after a given project is completed? Is it just more projects? Does it become increasingly difficult to come up with new projects after a while? Is it mostly maintenance after the low-hanging fruit projects are completed? I picture data science as a project-based onto the next type of role where your value is determined by your ability to continue to come up with new project ideas. Basically like a consultant role. Maybe this is a confidence issue, but I can't help but feel like I would eventually run out of ideas. I'm curious if you might have any thoughts on this.
That's a great question. So I try to come up with a year and a half roadmap, right, in terms of stuff I could work on. And you might have remembered my kind of point on the crawl, walk, run. You're never going to have a perfect model, perfect solution right off the bat. So that inherently is taking a problem and breaking it up into multiple data science projects, right? You're going to be doing that for many different projects, right? If inherently you're not able to come up with ideas, which is okay, what I recommend is just have one-on-ones with stakeholders who would probably help facilitate the generation of new projects, right? So when I joined this group at Disney, I had some context and some ideas of what they want to work on, but it was pretty minor, right? What I did was I set up one-on-ones with the marketing lead, the product lead, the content curation lead, and then one of the execs who's kind of managing a lot of it, and just had a very open-ended discussion of what are some friction points that you're dealing with, right? What's a direction you'd like to see your organization move in, right? You're kind of asking like a consultant, but when you ask those types of questions, they are going to be giving you the problems or the ideas that you need to come up with, right? So like when you start to get those responses from them, that'll probably help facilitate and help you ideate and come up with a roadmap. And I'm telling you, if you do one of those like ideation sessions or like one-on-ones, like maybe 2 a year, I guarantee you're continue to pretty much like create more and more projects for your roadmap. What I also recommend, which is tangential to the project or your question that you've asked, when you've done this and created all the projects, I really recommend you create a roadmap with all these ideas that you've created and showcase that with a broad audience, right? Like your projects are going to span product, marketing, all the groups I just mentioned. Make sure you get them in a room and you show that here are all your projects laid out in a roadmap. You guys are all going to get your projects worked on, but it's going to happen in a certain order, just so they realize that you have taken the time and effort to look at complexity and priority, etc., and then laid it out in a concise, thoughtful manner. Doing that is invaluable. It shows your credibility, shows that you aren't going to be rash to jumping into a project. Those steps are really critical and something I do on a day-to-day basis. Deji, Thanks. Yeah, thanks for stopping by. Also, I think, can you guys, this is amazing that folks from Hungary, Argentina are here, learning and collaborating with all of us. I think it's a testament to this community that we're building.
Thank you, Chris. Next from Ryan, what are mistakes? Sorry, I'm going to restart. What are mistakes that you have noticed amateur data scientists make, and how can they be avoided?
Let's see. I would say not doing a good job of like cleaning the data, not cleaning, but like analyzing the data. Like it's so often that like they'll just take maybe like 30 minutes to look at the data and really don't understand like the nuances of the data set, and they come back like, oh, like that's not working, but oh, did you check for this? Did you check for this distribution? Oh, is the target variable highly imbalanced? But they just won't check for these things. Is there a lot of null values? Like these super basic things I think people just forget to do. One thing I've noticed in like amateur data scientists that I think is a really like bad quality is they don't try 2, 3, 4 things to overcome a problem that they've encountered. I don't expect you to have the answer, right? I expect you to have tried multiple things. That shows that you're trying to go down a path of like logical problem solving. And if you still run into a wall, okay, I could tell you tried, but time and time again, I see amateur data scientists or junior data scientists just come up with a problem and then just come to me with a question right away without even trying. That's a big pet peeve, and I absolutely hate that. And it can easily be avoided. Just try harder, right? Like just ask yourself the question and try to solve it.
Thank you, Ryan. Next from Jacob, what are the added responsibilities as a senior data scientist compared to a junior data scientist?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think junior data scientists probably going to be more in the weeds. I'm sure a lot of the developments will be handled by junior data scientists. Senior data scientists, I think in developing the problems, right, sharing results, more the presenting, high level strategic thinking is probably going to be done more by the senior data scientists. Obviously, the senior data scientists are still developing quite a bit, but it's more guided junior data scientists. And also like the role of a senior data scientist is going to be sorry, I'm getting a little distracted, but senior data scientists will also help guide, do code checks, etc., of the work of a junior data scientist. I love that, Andrew. Like, what 3 things have you tried? Exactly, right? Exactly. That's such a great kind of quick framework to make sure you're going to your superior in a more prepared way.
Thank you, Jacob, for your question. Thanks, Andrew, for that follow-up comment. Next up, Abhijit is asking, how would someone get the most out of their data science masters?
Great question. I would say take what you've learned in a particular class and apply it to your own problem statement. Doing that a lot is highly invaluable. If you're doing a full-time master's, I would potentially hop on some research that's being done with your professors. I think that's a really great way to build your portfolio even more, make your resume stand out some more. I think those are the 2 things I would say. Also, like electives are for you to use to your benefit, right? So maybe doing some research and some interesting classes that you could take. Make sure you work on, get exposure to a wide variety of things. I think that's super useful during your master's.
Next question from Tom. When you're the only data scientist in your area and you want to start a new project, what goals or milestones are constructive to have in order to self-evaluate your project success or progress?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let's see. So if you're starting a project, right, you want to figure out what do you actually want the model to do, right? Like, so you could do like I'll go back to the prescription model, right? Prescription forecasting. I could have easily changed the models to say, oh, I'm just going to predict whether or not they're going to have a prescription and not how many, right? Or like I could have flipped it and said, you know what, like I don't actually need to predict how many. I could just maybe bucket your output probability into 3 buckets, like high, medium, low, or even more granular buckets, right? Working with the stakeholder who's going to be using this and understanding what's the ideal output that makes sense for the problem statement is really critical. So like that's kind of how I evaluate a goal, right? And then okay, this is what the output's going to look like. Then you got to see, okay, what's the risk of not getting it right? So in say cancer detection or melanoma detection, etc., you want to be like 99%, right? You want your like evaluation metric to be super high. In my case, for a sales rep, like an F1 score of zero point 0.7 is just going to cost some money because maybe they're going to the wrong person, it's wasted time, but I'm not killing anyone, right? So that's a good way to evaluate kind of the success of a project, right? And progress, you always want to see how is your metric evolving over time. Are you actually improving, right? Is your model performance actually getting better? What I also like to do with stakeholders is walk them along the path, right? So you can do one or two things. You could say, okay, I'm going to kick off this project. This is what you're going to get at the end, and then show them what they're going to get at the end. I avoid that because they're going to be that much more critical, right? Like if it's not perfect, they're going to be, wow, you wasted all this time. What I like to do, it's kind of like the agile method. I like to showcase results along the way so that they see how your model has improved, how you've kind of grown with them to end up with this kind of great model at the very end. I think it's really useful to work that way because you get to, I don't know, they get to feel like they were along the ride. And I think then they're more accepting of the model output at the very end. Yeah, I think that's kind of, I think it's the best way I can answer that question. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we have, is 40 too old to enter the data science job market?
I wouldn't look at age, just look at like your skill set, right? Do you have the ability to learn quickly? Do you have the abilities needed to even hit the ground running? Do you have the abilities to work at a similar pace as someone who's younger? Do you have the stamina, right? I think these are the questions people are going to ask. If you could easily showcase that, that's just a non-issue for you, you're completely fine.
Thank you for that question. Next one, Samit, how many times have you come across a problem where you thought you could use ML or predictive analysis, but the data just wasn't right for anything to get out of it? How do you express the importance of good data to business stakeholders and tell them that sometimes the data is just good enough?
See, Alvin, yeah, thanks for attending. It's really awesome. Yeah, it's a great question. So what you need to do is showcase the consequences of using the data you have, right? Rather than say, oh, if we have better data, we could do this, flip it, because business really cares about the consequences, right? Like there's really that big of a deal. You need to showcase how big of a deal it is. Be like, hey, look, if we use bad data, our predictions really wouldn't be scalable. So we would actually end up maybe losing X number of dollars, or we would like kill X number of people. I know it's like morbid, but showcase and frame the question in that perspective so that they understand like, okay, wow, like we need to take care of this. I would definitely do that. And I've done that in the past.
Thank you, Samit. Next question, is data science shifting more towards software engineering?
I wouldn't say that. I think there's a role for that. I think the DS software engineering overlap is a machine learning engineering. I think that is its role. That kind of is what you're alluding to.
Next from Shashank. Hey Madhav, I'm a freshman doing my bachelor's in computer science with a specialization in data science. How would you think I need to start preparing from scratch to get good in the field and bag opportunities in the field? I'm really interested and intrigued about the field of data science, and I don't see myself changing fields in the future.
It's good to hear. It's good to know that you're really passionate about this. So you're a freshman. I think it's not ever early enough to start working on projects, right? I think start building your portfolio, start small. It's all about inertia, right? The second you start working on something and working on another thing, you just start to get more comfortable, right? Like I think feeling confident about taking a blank notebook and starting is the half the battle, right? If once you start feeling confident about, oh, I'm just going to start this, I think you're just going to do more, right? So I think that's one thing to really help you start building your portfolio. And as a freshman, I think I don't know where you're studying, but I'm sure there's researchers, grad students, PhDs that are probably working on interesting projects. Just reach out, be like, hey, can I just shadow you guys? Can I just attend your meetings? Can I maybe work on a small piece of the port the code, right? That is a great way for you to get some really kind of like exciting stuff on your resume. I think that's probably the best feedback I could give.
Next question, what advice would you give someone that wants to transition from a new grad analytics role to a data science one?
So I think I mentioned earlier on, like the difference in data analytics and data science. I think you'd want to be more comfortable with Python, PySpark, and AWS, right? You want to also be really proficient with SQL. I would recommend kind of making sure those skill sets are up to par. But then also, you'd want to build a portfolio that showcase that you actually are that comfortable with those frameworks, right? So do other projects that showcase that you can be a great data scientist. So I will say, I would say like 3-4 more questions. And then I think, like, I can't believe there's still 30 questions left. I feel bad for not answering all of it, but just a couple more questions left, just because I think I just want to eat dinner and stuff. But I'm glad you guys want me to post kind of the questions in a separate video. I'll definitely do that. And then next Monday, I'll share on Reddit again. And so you guys are aware of our next session.
And just so everyone knows, we do have all the questions documented, so they'll all get answered.
Yeah.
Next from Ben, when you're working on projects on the side, what is the scope of the project you're aiming to complete, whether it be for fun or to display a skill set?
I just try to make it fun. So I think about two things. Am I gonna have fun working on it? And what's a cool way to showcase it? Yeah, like those are the two questions. Sorry, I just got a little distracted. So those are two kind of questions I ask myself, right? Like, so the one summarizing the text summarizer, right? So like in that part, I was like, okay, like I really want to work on like text summarization. It seems fun, right? And I just thought about, oh, I think it'd be really great if I showcase it in a cool article that compares the three approaches, and that's pretty much it. That's how I started. For the text generation one, I was like, okay, I really want to work with GPT-2. It'd be really cool if I build something that someone could like press a button and see a new generated text, right? That's as simple as it gets in terms of how I started, and then I just start building, and I start researching, etc. That's exactly how I start, and I think that'll work. That's a great way to think about it for anyone trying to start a project.
Thank you, Ben. Next from Vatsal, in the recent years, data science has found its way into every industry possible. As a person who's looking for my first job, should I narrow down my field to my area of interest while applying for my first job?
There's pros and cons to that, right? I think you'll enjoy the data, which is good, but do your research, right? Like if there really isn't that many opportunities and maybe the field of interest requires like a certain level of skill, then it might make sense to broaden, right? You got to be pragmatic with where you're looking. Yeah, I think that's my best piece of advice. If your field of interest is say entertainment, then narrow it down to that, because it's a definitely different type of data, and I recommend, and there's plenty of jobs there, right? You'd want to make sure there's enough jobs so that you actually have, it's not too competitive, right? I think that's really important to look at.
And Madhu, I'm just going to combine these last two questions together just because they're really similar.
Sure.
Tom is asking, skill-wise, if you already know R, would it also help to learn Python to improve chances of getting a data science job or role? And the next question is there a preference to using Python over R at Disney?
Yeah, so Disney used Python, PySpark more than R. I don't know anyone around me in my like network in Disney that uses R. If you know R, you need to learn Python. I think you would be excluded for a lot of jobs for not knowing Python because so many orgs are just embedded in using Python or Python-based framework like PySpark consistently, right? So if you don't know Python, I think it's a requirement at this point.
Thank you guys for those questions. Those are 3 questions. You want to continue going on, Madhav, for a little bit?
Let's do one more question.
Yes. Abhijit is asking a question related to your favorite topic, NLP. What kind of work do you do at Disney in NLP? Are there any ML platforms that data scientists work at as well?
Also, the first question, I'm a little confused on the second one. To answer your first question, so there's 2 off the top of my head that we've worked on. So I think I mentioned to generate similar movies to the movie that you're viewing at that moment, we take all the metadata like storyline, etc., but we also vectorize using deep learning techniques the synopsis of a movie, and then use that to also compare, are these movies similar or not? That's one. We also run topic models to we built topic models to take customer reviews to see if we could find latent pieces of feedback that we can then leverage to guide our product roadmap. Those are 2 NLP applications that I've used recently. Are there ML platforms that data scientists work at as well? Abhijit, are you still here? Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? Let's give him a minute. So Peter, I really hope I'm not discouraged. While we wait for his response, Peter, I really didn't want to like be discouraging. This is just within my ecosystem, right? And other corporations, I know a lot of the more research heavy science type of data science, scientific types of data science roles, especially like clinical research, medical research, are using R quite a bit. It's just in my experience, I've noticed that like as a screener, R is required. So definitely don't think of it as discouraging. It's just, I think in my limited view, what I've seen up until now. I hope I didn't kind of discourage you. Abhijit, I know quite a few kind of dropped off. It is getting late, but I would say like I'll assume he said are there ML platforms that data scientists work on as well. So I have used some of the AWS machine learning frameworks like AWS Personalize, AWS TextTrack. So the AWS suite is something we've worked with quite a bit.
Thank you, Abhijit. So that'll be it for questions, guys. Madhav, I'll hand it off to you to conclude here.
Yeah, it's great feedback, Pete. It's awesome. Okay, just reading some of the messages. So as I mentioned, right, we are recording all these questions, and over the next week or so, I'll definitely provide a video just kind of answering all of these questions. I want to first just thank you guys for attending and showing this interest. I think we've been doing this for, I think, about 2 months. It's still just so new. And like I said, like the fact that there is this much interest is just unbelievably exciting to me and us, right? I think was never expecting this much demand, and to have 130 of you guys to attend at the beginning of the session is just insane. Like it's bigger than like any class I've ever taken in college, right? I think it's so amazing to me. Moving forward, I'm going to continue to post on LinkedIn, on Reddit every Monday, so you guys are aware of any new sessions that are going to be coming out. Please join our LinkedIn group just so we can start figuring out what's the best way to build this community and what's kind of the most helpful for you guys. And yeah, and like I said, we're coming up with a lot of ideas. Like we want to potentially do like mock interviews to help you guys see like where you might go right and wrong within within a interview, right? I think we're going to start putting out more and more useful content that will help you kind of get that first job. And so with all that, I hope you guys found that useful. I'm going to definitely say huge thanks to Millen and Sarah for help curating all the content and moderating, right? I think we've had over 60 questions come through and they help facilitate and dismiss questions that were a little redundant, which is, I think, a really critical part of these Q&A sessions. So a big kind of thanks to them. And I'll see you guys next week where we have the guest presenter. And yeah, be sure to register so you guys are informed. With that, I think we'll close. See you guys. Cool. Yeah, you're welcome, guys. See ya.